Imagine being the most powerful man in the empire, commanding armies, feared by your enemies, obeyed by your people. And then, imagine your own soldiers turning against you, not with swords, not with daggers, but with shovels. They drag you into your own tent, pin you down, and begin to bury you alive beneath the dirt floor. Why would hardened warriors commit such a horrifying act? And what could drive soldiers to silence their emperor in such a cruel and secretive way? Today, we unravel the dark tale of Emperor Carus. To understand this gruesome betrayal, we need to step back into the late 3rd century, a time of chaos and bloodshed for the Roman world. The empire was staggering under constant invasions, civil wars, and assassinations. In fact, this was known as the crisis of the 3rd century, when emperors rose and fell with frightening speed. Carus wasn't born into royalty. He was a soldier, a hardened commander who earned the loyalty of his men. In 283 AD, after the suspicious death of Emperor Probus, Carus was proclaimed emperor by the legions. Some say Probus was murdered by his own troops, and Carus simply stepped into the vacuum of power. Others suggest Carus himself may have had a hand in it. Either way, he emerged as Rome's leader, and he wasted no time marching east against the empire's greatest rival. At first, things went well. Carus pushed deep into Persian territory, winning victories and capturing cities. His troops carried him across the Euphrates and into Mesopotamia, where he claimed the grand title of Persicus Maximus, the conqueror of Persia. But victory came at a price. The deeper Carus marched, the more restless his soldiers became. Supplies ran low. Disease spread through the camp, and whispers began to circulate. Had they marched too far from Rome's heartlands? Was their emperor leading them to glory or to ruin? Here's where the story twists into legend. Ancient historians give us conflicting accounts of Carus's death. One report says he was struck by lightning in his tent, a divine punishment, perhaps, for daring to challenge Persia. Another whispers that he fell sick and died suddenly. But the most haunting version is this. Carus was betrayed by his own soldiers. His men, weary of war and distrustful of their commander, decided to silence him in the most final way possible. They entered his tent at night, pinned him down, and began shoveling dirt onto his body until he suffocated, buried alive under the weight of the earth itself. Why would loyal legions do this? The answer lies in fear. The Roman army wasn't just a fighting force, it was a kingmaker. Soldiers expected their emperors to lead them to victory and safety. But if they believed a commander had lost the favor of the gods, or worse, was leading them to disaster, they could, and often did, remove him. Killing a Roman emperor outright was risky. It could spark backlash. But burying him alive inside his tent, leaving little evidence of murder, was a chillingly clever solution. If questioned, the soldiers could simply claim, he died in the night, perhaps struck by lightning, perhaps seized by sickness. No one could prove otherwise. Picture the scene. The emperor, once the supreme commander of Rome's armies, kneeling in his pavilion as dirt piles higher and higher. A single candle sputters in the darkness, while outside, the camp lies silent. No swords clash. No orders are shouted. Only the quiet scrape of shovels as the men entomb their leader beneath the soil. For the soldiers, it was both practical and symbolic. By burying Carus, they erased him, snuffing out his presence in secrecy, avoiding the spectacle of open assassination. The tent itself became a tomb, swallowed by earth, as though the emperor had never returned from Persia at all. When dawn came, the army announced that Carus was dead. Officially, his death was blamed on illness, or on that freak lightning strike. His sons, Carinus and Numerian, were proclaimed co-emperors, and the army began its march back toward Roman territory. But the empire would not stabilize. Carinus gained a reputation for corruption and excess, while Numerian soon met a suspicious death of his own. Rome spiraled once again into civil war, with generals and usurpers rising to claim the throne. The cycle of bloodshed continued, proving that burying Carus alive had done nothing to heal the deeper wounds of the empire. So was Carus truly buried alive by his own soldiers? Or was this just another rumor, born in the shadows of campfire whispers? The truth is hard to untangle. Ancient sources contradict each other, and some historians argue the story of the burial was invented to disguise a more ordinary death. But whether legend or fact, The tale reveals something profound: the sheer fragility of power in ancient Rome. An emperor could rise on the loyalty of his soldiers, and in a single night be smothered by it. If Carus was indeed buried alive, then his death was one of the best-covered conspiracies in Roman history. Ancient writers record that his men announced the emperor had been struck down by lightning. At first glance, this might sound like a wild excuse. But in Roman culture, lightning wasn't just weather. It was a message from the gods. But the soldiers' plot didn't end with Carus. His younger son Nemirian, who had been proclaimed co-emperor, soon met a fate just as mysterious. While returning from the Persian campaign, Nemirian traveled in a closed litter, hidden from public view. For days, his generals claimed he was too ill to appear. But when the stench of decay grew unbearable, the litter was opened. Inside was the emperor's corpse, rotting in silence. His death was blamed on illness, but suspicions of foul play were everywhere. Some accused his powerful Praetorian prefect, Aper, of murdering him. Others believed the army, once again, had quietly removed a ruler they no longer trusted. The elder son, Carinus, inherited the Western Empire. But instead of securing stability, he plunged Rome into deeper turmoil. Ancient sources describe him as corrupt, arrogant, and cruel. He reportedly seduced the wives of senators, executed officials without trial, and indulged in extravagant displays while his empire crumbled. Burial alive was not a common punishment in Rome. In fact, it was reserved for one specific crime: breaking sacred vows. The Vestal virgins, who were sworn to chastity, were executed by being buried alive if they betrayed their oath. If Carus was truly killed in this manner, the act carried chilling symbolism. To the soldiers, perhaps he had broken his oath as emperor, leading them too far, ignoring their safety, tempting the wrath of the gods. By burying him, they weren't just killing a man. They were performing a ritual, erasing him like a disgraced Vestal, sealing his fate with earth. This interpretation transforms the story from a simple military mutiny into something far more ritualistic and terrifying. And Carus was far from the only Roman emperor to meet a grisly end. Consider Caracalla, assassinated while relieving himself on the side of a road, or Elagabalus, dragged through the streets, mutilated, and tossed into the Tiber, or Valerian, captured by the Persians and, according to legend, used as a human footstool by the Persian king before dying in captivity. Carus's burial alive fits into this long, blood-soaked pattern. Roman emperors lived at the pinnacle of power, but their deaths were often humiliating, violent, and unforgettable. So, was Carus truly buried alive? Historians remain divided. Some argue the story is too sensational, too theatrical, to be believed. They lean toward the simpler explanation, that Carus died of illness, or was indeed struck by lightning during a storm. Others, however, see hints of truth in the burial tale. After all, Roman soldiers had a long record of murdering emperors they distrusted. Why not here? The silence, the secrecy, the lightning story, it all fits the pattern of a mutiny carefully disguised as an accident.